I never told my parents I was a federal judge. At Christmas, they pointed to the freezing shed. "Take the old burden," my father said. Inside, I found Grandpa shivering. I made one call: execute the arrest warrants. My grandfather's hands were the wrong temperature. That's the detail that broke through everything else. Not the shed, not the blanket worn thin as paper, not the blue tinge at the edge of his lips, not the unplugged space heater sitting in the corner like a punchline someone forgot to finish. His hands. Walter Hayes had spent 40 years doing physical work, construction, then finished carpentry, then 30 years of his own shop, and his hands had always been the hands of a man who used them, warm and rough and present. They were cold in the specific way that a thing is cold when warmth has been leaving it for a long time. I crouched down in the dark of that shed on Christmas Eve and held his hands between mine and felt the temperature of them and understood, with the particular clarity that arrives in the body before it reaches the mind, that we did not have a lot of time. "Ethan," he said, my name in his voice, still him. "I'm here," I said. "I've got you." Behind me, through the shed door I'd left open, I could hear my parents on the patio, not scared, not rushing toward us, standing in the December air with the specific patience of people who believe the situation is under control because it has been under control, because he had been out here long enough that they had stopped thinking about him as something that required managing. My mother's voice carried clearly. "Don't be dramatic," she said. He agreed to all of it. I wrapped my coat around my grandfather's shoulders and did not turn around. "I need to tell you about Walter Hayes before I tell you what happened next, because who he is explains everything about the 21 years that led to that shed. He is 79 years old. He married my grandmother, Ruth, when they were both 23, and they spent 51 years building a life together in the specific way of people who understand that a life is built with your hands and your presence and your daily choices, not assembled from the outside in, but constructed from the inside out, one honest day at a time. Ruth died 6 years ago. She left Walter a paid-off house, a workshop full of tools that still smelled like sawdust, and the knowledge that he had been loved completely for 5 decades, which is more than most people get. He left me a desk. This was in October, the year I turned 17. I came home from a closing shift at the diner where I worked weekends to find my parents' house empty, not ransacked, not disrupted, but deliberately vacated. Furniture gone, photographs gone, the particular absence of a space that has been cleared out rather than broken into. A note on the kitchen counter in my mother's handwriting: "You'll figure it out." 2 words. 17 years of parenthood, summarized. I stood in that empty kitchen for a while. Then I called Walter. He came in his truck with a sleeping bag and a sandwich and sat at the kitchen counter. My counter, I suppose, for whatever that was worth, and listened while I told him what I had found. He didn't say much. Walter has never been a man who fills silence to manage his own discomfort. What he said was, "You'll come stay with me for now." Then, after a pause, "And Ethan, build yourself on honest days. That's the only foundation that doesn't shift." He meant it practically. He meant do the work in front of you, the real work, the kind that requires you to show up and be present and produce something actual at the end of it. He meant it the way a carpenter means it: structure first, ornament later, and know the difference. I moved into his spare room. I lived there for 2 years. I graduated high school while working construction at dawn and studying at night. I put myself through college. I put myself through law school, Boston University, loans and work study, and 3 years of sleeping less than I needed. I clerked for a federal circuit judge named the Honorable Catherine Morrow, who is one of the 3 sharpest people I have ever encountered, and who told me at the end of my clerkship that I had a facility for finding the structure inside complicated situations. She meant it as a compliment. I took it as a description. I practiced federal law for 8 years. Prosecution, primarily, corruption and financial crimes, the specific territory where money and power collaborate to do damage to people who have less of both. I was good at it, not because I am particularly clever, but because I grew up without money and I understand what its absence does to people, and I have never been able to make myself indifferent to that understanding. 3 years ago, I was confirmed as a federal district judge at 38 years old. I did not tell my parents. I did not tell them because they did not call, and I did not call, and silence had become the cleanest possible description of our relationship, more accurate than anything I could have said out loud. They had made a choice in that empty kitchen. I had made a different choice in the years after. The distance between those 2 choices had become, over time, the space where a family used to be. Walter knew about the confirmation. He was there. He sat in the 3rd row in a suit he had pressed himself, and he watched me take the oath, and when it was over, he shook my hand with both of his, warm, rough, present, and said, "Your grandmother would have been very proud." That was enough. My mother called the first week of December on a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened to it in my car in the parking garage of the federal courthouse with the engine idling. Her voice was soft. The practiced soft of someone who has been working on this call for a while and has settled on a register they believe will be effective. "Ethan, it's Mom. I know it's been a long time. Your father and I have been doing a lot of reflection. We're older now. We carry so much regret about how things went. We want our family back, if you're willing." A pause. "We'd love to see you. Maybe Christmas. Just dinner. No pressure. No pressure." I sat with the voicemail. "I want to tell you that I felt nothing when I heard it, but that would be less than honest. honest. What I felt was more complicated. Not warmth, not openness, but the particular gravity of a person who still carries the original wound and has learned to carry it efficiently and does not, in any simple sense, want to go back anywhere near the source of it. But Walter. I had spoken to my grandfather the previous Sunday, as I did every Sunday. He had mentioned carefully that he wasn't feeling well. The careful way he mentions things that he doesn't want to worry me, which means they are worrying him. He had mentioned that my parents had been helpful lately, which was new information, delivered with a neutrality that I did not examine closely enough. I called my mother back. We talked for 11 minutes. She said the things the voicemail had prepared me for: regret, reflection, family, Christmas. She did not mention Walter specifically. I did not mention him either. I said I would come for Christmas Eve dinner. Against everything I knew about what empty kitchens mean, I drove to their house on Christmas Eve. The house looked like money. New siding, recently done. I could tell from the clean edges. A luxury SUV in the driveway that had not been their vehicle the last time I had been here, which was years ago for reasons I don't need to detail. Decorative lights across the gutters, the expensive programmable kind, cycling through colors with the unhurried confidence of people who are not worried about the electricity bill. My father opened the door in a sweater that looked like it had been selected rather than worn. My mother hugged me too long, the hug of someone performing reunion rather than having it. The house smelled like roast beef and cinnamon and the particular neutralizing freshness of a space that has been cleaned and staged within the past few hours. The dining room table was set for 3, not 4. I noticed that. We made small talk, 11 minutes of it by my internal clock, the strained managed conversation of people who have an enormous amount of history and are choosing, by mutual and unspoken agreement, not to touch any of it. My father asked about work in the vague way of someone who doesn't know what you do. My mother commented on how well I looked in the specific way she used to use when she wanted something. Then she glanced toward the back of the house. "There's one more thing," she said. Casual, the register of someone mentioning something minor. "Since you always cared so much about, family." She gestured toward the glass door to the backyard. "Maybe you should handle it." My father's voice from behind me, flat, bored. The voice of a man referring to an administrative task. "The old burden is out back. Take him. The old burden." I looked at the backyard through the glass, past the patio furniture, past the landscaped beds. At the edge of the property where the yard met the fence line, there was a shed, a thin line of light under the door. I ran. I do not remember the distance between the glass door and the shed. I remember the latch, padlocked from the outside, which is a detail I registered with a part of my brain that has spent a decade in courtrooms and knows what it means when a person is secured in a structure from the exterior. I photographed the lock before I opened it. 10 years of federal cases had given me one reflex above all others: never let outrage run faster than evidence. Whatever I was about to find, I needed it documented. Whatever came next, I needed to be able to prove what I had seen, in a format that would survive scrutiny before I did anything else. I photographed the lock. I photographed the exterior of the shed. I photographed the frost on the inside of the single window, visible from outside, which told me the interior temperature. Then I opened it. The space heater was in the corner, unplugged. A broken lawn chair, a moth-eaten blanket that I recognized as the kind of blanket you give something when you are not willing to give it anything better. A cardboard box with medication bottles. I read the labels: blood pressure, a blood thinner, a daily aspirin regimen, scattered, not organized, some of them visibly past the dispensing dates on the pharmacy labels, and Walter, my grandfather, on the lawn chair with the blanket pulled around him, wearing the wool sweater I had sent him for his birthday last February, shivering with the shallow rhythm of someone who has been cold for long enough that the shivering has become less violent rather than more. I crouched down. I took his hands. Wrong temperature. I put my phone on the ground and used both hands to hold his. "Ethan," he said. "I'm here," I said. "You're okay. I'm right here." "They sold my house," he said. The specific directness of someone who has been alone with a thing for long enough that it comes out without preamble. "I signed papers. They said refinance. Then strangers came. Everything Ruth left." He stopped, gathered something. When I asked about it, your father grabbed my arm. He shifted the blanket, showed me his forearm. The bruise was 4 inches across, the greenish yellow of an injury several days old, centered on the muscle in the way that happens when someone's grip is intentional rather than incidental. I looked at it for 2 seconds. Then I picked up my phone and I photographed everything: the shed interior, the broken chair, the blanket, the unplugged space heater, the medication bottles in the cardboard box, close enough that the label dates were legible, the exterior lock, the frost on the window from inside, Walter's bruised forearm, with his face visible above it so the chain of identification was unambiguous. 41 photographs in 4 minutes. Then I helped him up, put my coat around his shoulders, and walked him slowly toward the patio. My parents were standing at the glass door when we came out, not hurrying toward us, standing. My mother with her arms crossed against the cold in the way of someone who has come outside, because it seemed like the appropriate place to be, not because she was alarmed. My father with his hands in his pockets, his expression the specific expression of a man who has categorized the situation and found it manageable. "Don't be dramatic," my mother said when we were close enough. "He agreed to all of it. He signed everything. He's old. old, my father said. He would have ended up in a facility eventually. We just made practical decisions ahead of schedule. I kept walking, got Walter to the patio door, opened it. Can you stand here for 1 minute? I said to him quietly. He looked at me. I'm all right, he said, still him. I turned back toward my parents. They had the look of people who are waiting for an argument, prepared for recrimination, for the raised voice, for the emotional confrontation they believed they could manage because they had managed me before. My father had 20 years of practice dismissing me. He still saw the kid from the empty kitchen, the broke student, the son who left and built something they'd never asked about. He did not see what I had become. I stepped closer. What exactly are you now, Ethan? My father said. The slight emphasis on exactly. The register of someone who believes the answer is going to be smaller than the moment. I reached into the inside pocket of my coat. I carry a credentials wallet, black leather, federal seal embossed on the cover, the kind of thing that I almost never need to produce because the courtroom knows who I am before I walk in. I have had it for 3 years and used it publicly perhaps 4 times. I held it open under the patio light, long enough for both of them to read every word. My mother looked at it first. Her mouth opened. My father looked second. His face went the color of old snow. Not white exactly, but the drained, stripped down gray of a man whose operating assumptions have just been removed from beneath him. Federal judge, he whispered. Confirmed 3 years ago, I said. District court. I've been assigned 2 elder fraud cases this year, which means I understand the relevant statutes with some specificity. I looked at him steadily. Coercive transfer of assets, unlawful confinement, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, medical neglect. These are not abstract terms to me. My father's mouth moved. No sound. What you should also know, I said, is that your names already appear in an open fraud filing. The title company flagged the property transfer 6 weeks ago as a potentially irregular transaction. The circumstances of the signing, the speed of the sale, the age and cognitive baseline of the seller. That filing went to the Financial Crimes Unit. I didn't start this case tonight. I paused. I just added to it. My mother found her voice. Ethan, he's your father. You can't. He put his grandfather in a locked shed, I said, not loudly, quietly, in December, with an unplugged heater. While you served roast beef inside, I looked at her and called him the old burden. I took out my phone. I dialed. The call connected on the second ring. I identified myself. I gave the address. I confirmed the open case number from memory. One of the 2 or 3 numbers in this situation I had looked up in my car before I came inside, because I had not come here entirely without preparation. Execute the warrants on the existing fraud package, I said. I'm on scene. I have a vulnerable adult who needs immediate medical assessment and transport. Yes, deputies and adult protective services both, please. I ended the call. My father looked at me with the expression of a man who believed, until this moment, that blood was a kind of protection. That family meant something in the specific direction he needed it to mean. A buffer, a silence, a reason for someone to look the other way. It didn't. Not this blood. Not mine. The deputies arrived in 14 minutes, 3 of them. A patrol supervisor named Sergeant Marcus Webb, 9 years with the county, direct and unhurried, who took my documentation without comment and went to work. Adult Protective Services sent a field investigator, a woman named Carol Diaz, who had been in elder services for 17 years, and who looked at the shed and at the medication bottles and at the bruise on Walter's forearm and made the assessment I expected her to make. Immediate removal, medical evaluation, full investigation. Walter was taken to the hospital for evaluation. I rode with him. He fell asleep in the passenger seat before we were out of the neighborhood, his head against the window, my coat still around his shoulders. His hands, by the time we reached the hospital, were warmer. Not right, but warmer. I want to tell you about the hospital, because this is the part of the story that I don't tell people, the part that lives in me differently from the legal outcome and the charges and the things that happened afterward. Walter was assessed by an ER physician named Dr. James Okafor, 12 years of emergency medicine, a man with the particular quality of competence that doesn't need to announce itself. He was cold, dehydrated, and his blood pressure medication had been administered inconsistently, which showed in his numbers and which Dr. Okafor told me was not immediately critical, but had the potential to become so. He was going to be okay. Dr. Okafor said this directly, looking at me, and I think he understood that I needed the information delivered without softening. He's going to be okay, he said. He needs warmth, fluids, and someone to manage his medication properly from here on. That's me, I said. He nodded, made a note. I sat in a chair beside Walter's bed in the ER and watched him sleep and thought about a spare room and a late wife's study desk and a piece of advice delivered without ceremony in an empty kitchen. Build yourself on honest days. I had built myself on honest days. I had built myself in the specific way Walter meant it. The construction at dawn, the night classes, the loans and the work study, and the years of showing up for work that needed doing, the cases that required me to find the structure inside complicated situations. I had built something that was entirely mine, on a foundation that did not shift, and I had done it because of this man sleeping in this hospital bed. He had asked nothing in return. He had been left in a shed. I sat there for a while. The case moved quickly, because it had already been moving before Christmas Eve. The title company's fraud flag from 6 weeks prior had been assigned to a financial crimes investigator named Detective Patricia Huang, 14 years with the county Financial Crimes Unit, the kind of investigator who approaches a case like a builder approaches a structure, methodically, from the foundation up, without skipping steps. She had already subpoenaed records. She already had the property transfer documents, the signing circumstances, the timeline. What she did not have before Christmas Eve was the full picture of what had happened to Walter after the transfer. I provided that. 41 photographs, time-stamped, chain of custody established through my own testimony, and Carol Diaz's independent field report. The medication documentation, the bruise, photographed and then separately documented by Dr. Okafor's examination notes. Sergeant Webb's report of the scene. My mother's attorney called my clerk's office on December 26th. I did not take the call. My parents were charged: elder financial abuse, coercive transfer of assets, unlawful confinement, and 1 count of criminal neglect each. My father faced an additional charge of battery for the bruise on Walter's arm, which Dr. Okafor's examination placed as consistent with a gripping injury caused by significant force. They retained a defense attorney. A good one. I know his reputation, which is solid. He called my personal number once, probably to feel out whether a family resolution was on the table. I did not return that call either. My involvement in the case was formally recused. A judge cannot serve in proceedings with a direct personal interest, which is proper and which I had anticipated. The case was assigned to a colleague. I filed my factual documentation as a witness and stepped back from the proceedings in all other respects. This is how it should work. I want to be clear about that. I didn't bend anything. I didn't use my position as a weapon. I used it as what it is: a credential, a set of contacts, a call that gets answered at night, a name that moves paperwork faster than a civilian's name would. The system worked the way it is supposed to work when someone with standing uses it correctly. My father wanted blood to protect him. What blood actually does when it comes from someone Walter Hayes raised is show up. Walter moved into my house in January. The spare room, the one I have had configured as a home office, became his room, which felt like a specific kind of rightness. I brought his tools from the storage unit where they had been sitting since the house sale, and I set up a small workshop space in the garage. And on the first Saturday after he was well enough to stand at a workbench, he went out and spent 3 hours doing something with a piece of white oak that he wouldn't show me until it was finished. It was a small box, fitted joints, no fasteners, the lid with a slight bevel that made it close with a sound like a satisfying sentence. He put it on my desk without ceremony. "For things you want to keep," he said. I looked at it. "Thank you," I said. He went back to the garage. My parents' case went to trial in late spring. I was not present. I had provided my documentation and testimony in the proper format and recused myself from everything else, and I followed the proceedings only through my colleagues' docket updates, which I had access to for professional reasons. My mother pleaded to a reduced charge after her attorney negotiated. Financial elder abuse, guilty, with a sentencing agreement that included restitution to Walter for the full value of the property and contents, mandatory elder care education, and 3 years probation. My father went to trial. He was convicted on 4 of the 5 charges. Sentencing is upcoming. Walter's house is gone, sold to a third party in good faith, legally unrecoverable. The restitution from my mother's plea covers approximately 2/3 of its assessed value. Walter has told me he does not want to pursue the remainder through civil litigation because, as he put it, I have what I need. He means the workshop. He means Sunday dinners. He means me. I believe him. My parents have not contacted me since the arrest. I have not contacted them. I find that I have nothing to say that would be useful, and nothing to hear that would not require more from me than I am willing to give right now. Maybe that changes. Maybe it doesn't. I hold the question at the edge of things and attend to what is in front of me. What is in front of me most days. A docket that requires careful attention. A desk that was a gift from a woman I never met but feel I know through the man she loved. A workshop in my garage that is occupied on Saturday mornings by a 79-year-old man who is building something he won't show me yet. Last Sunday, I asked Walter what he was making. He thought about it. "Something for your courtroom," he said. "When it's done." "You don't have to do that," I said. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm doing it." I let him go back to the garage.